Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this particular session of the GCM webinar. It's my pleasure to be a part of this particular webinar series. My name is Stuti Chakravarti, and I was one of the mentees for the very first worldwide cohort of Global Changemakers Mentorship Program back in 2019. And it was a truly amazing and life-changing experience for me, and so I'm really thankful to GTM for of some of my co-founders that are joining me today for this particular webinar. So to introduce myself, I'm Stuti Chakravarti, as I mentioned, and I'm currently working as a neurorehabilitation professional at Christian Medical College, Vellore, mainly involved in the treatment of people with neurological disorders. And in the future, I aspire to become an academic neuroscientist. So it's my pleasure to talk to you today about imposter syndrome, and also a little bit about Stimulus, which is a youth-led nonprofit initiative that I co-founded with two amazing women who have joined me today. So just to give you an overview of what Stimulus is and what we're trying to do at Stimulus, we are an extremely new organization which is completely youth-led, predominantly comprised of a lot of young women and girls in our team. And we at Stimulus are trying to foster curiosity through outreach and advocacy in the brain sciences. Brain sciences encompassing psychological sciences, neuroscience, neurodisability, and all other aspects of things related to the brain. And so at Stimulus, we are trying to create awareness and make neuroscience more accessible to young people, right from starting from high school or middle school students up till any level of higher education. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Shriya Naidu and Sasha Gural, both of whom are my amazing co-founders and also the brains, so-called, behind Stimulus. So Sasha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I guess a little bit about myself is I am one of the co-founders of Stimulus. I'm 18 years old. I graduated high school last year. And I'm actually on a gap year right now. And I'll be enrolling at Harvard University this fall, potentially to study neuroscience. I'm extremely passionate about global health equity, specifically mental health and menstrual health, and also disability advocacy. And something else that I'm very passionate about is education, which is the field that I've primarily been working in over my gap year. And so Stimulus comes at the intersection of those two things. And I think that's what makes me passionate about Stimulus. And then Shriya, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sasha, and thanks, Stuti, for this opportunity. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for GCM for giving us this opportunity. All right, so I'm Shriya Naidu, and I'm currently working as a project assistant in IIT Gandhinagar in the Center for Cognitive and Brain Sciences, and I'm also the co-founder of Stimulus. I have a background in psychology with the sciences. I've been fascinated by the human brain and behavior, and that has consequently led me to be part of Stimulus. I'm also a Brain Awareness Week grant awardee by IBRO and Dana Foundation, and that is an award for outreach activities in the brain sciences. And through that, I've had the opportunity to work in outreach in brain sciences and cognitive science. So I'm really happy to be here and contribute to Stimulus in this fashion.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your amazing introductions. So as you can see, I'm supported by an amazing team of really incredible women. And so today we're going to talk to you a little bit about our journey with something known as imposter syndrome. And this is going to encompass our journey towards change making, navigating, a field or career in change making, as well as just our journey talking about or reflecting on how we have come across so many things and what we have, what we've seen ourselves change, and basically our journey of growth. and how we've also dealt with imposter syndrome in this process as women in STEM or young girls in STEM. So with that, I would like to invite both of you to tell us, our audience, a little bit about what you think imposter syndrome is and what was probably your first experience with imposter syndrome. And before we go into that, I would just like to caution the audience that this is not mental health advice. We are not licensed mental health professionals. And so we're not kind of giving out any mental health or therapeutic advice. This is just our journey and our reflections and what has worked or not worked for us. And so, in this regard, we would request you to not take this as professional advice and also suggest you that in case you're facing any difficulty or issue with your mental health, to kindly reach out to a licensed mental health professional. So with that, Sasha, I would like to invite you to share your first experience with imposter syndrome and also tell our audience today what you think imposter syndrome is.
All right, of course. I think starting out, probably my first experience with imposter syndrome was when I first got into college. And I think the reason for that is just because at school, Kolkata does happen to be like a tightly knit city. My school was also pretty small. It was a very intimate learning environment. It was a place where I was very comfortable. So it was almost like my comfort zone. And I did know, so I had known for a long time that that's not how it was always going to be. And that down the line, of course, I would be forced to kind of move beyond my comfort zone. And that's something that I was looking forward to as well. But I think when it does happen, it does kind of hit you. So I think, especially with college, I didn't expect to get in. To I didn't think I'd be accepted. And when I was accepted, I had a very hard time believing I was accepted. I didn't know why. I kept like passing through my application. I'm like, what could have possibly worked? And I do not deserve this. So I think that was probably my first experience with imposter syndrome. And I think that's again very typical because there are a lot of people, as soon as you get into college, the imposter syndrome hits you like a truck. And funnily enough, I spoke to like all of my classmates last year and then the admits that gotten this year, and every single one was in the same place. So I think that was my first experience with imposter syndrome, but it's also something that a lot of other people experience. And I would say on a more I suppose like a place that I've experienced it maybe more directly, because of course I haven't been to college yet, so my college imposter syndrome hasn't really had tangible effects just yet. A place that I've experienced it more directly would probably be at the workplace. So a lot of the work I do, I'm working over my gap year, and I'm usually the only a high school graduate in the room. I'm usually the youngest in the room, and so with like no degrees or no expertise or formal experience per se. So sometimes I have a hard time accepting achievements or accepting my authority in a room, just given my age and relative lack of experience. But yeah, and Shreya,
Thank you so much
yeah.
for sharing, Sasha. I would also like to invite you to just share with your audience very briefly what, according to you, imposter syndrome is actually.
Absolutely. So I think there is a very fine line, but also a very important line between humility and imposter syndrome. So it's one thing to be humble or to be modest about your achievements. Nobody likes somebody that brags. It's always good to be humble. It's always good to be modest because, of course, that makes things better for you and for everybody around you in the room. But at the same time, I feel like the the line where I think the point at which humility becomes imposter syndrome is when that humility begins to actively affect your levels of achievement or your openness to new experiences. So I think, when you're humble or where you're like, I want to kind of downplay my achievements, I don't want to overplay them, that's usually okay. But when you reach the point where you're like, I do not deserve this, and so I'm going to say no to this wonderful opportunity in front of me because I think I'm not deserving of it, or I don't think I deserve to take credit for this accomplishment that is obviously mine to take credit for, and so I'm going to be quiet about it and downplay it, and I think tangibly sort of like harm my ability to succeed or my performance at the workplace or at school or wherever it may be. I think that's when it turns into imposter syndrome. So, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you for
you
sharing.
beautifully like Sasha, the way she mentioned it, I mean, there's also the whole aspect of sometimes when you feel like you don't deserve it, sometimes you feel like there's no point even trying to work towards it because you may not be able to create something that is worth what the standard is. And so that might actually directly affect, maybe through your mental health, may directly actually affect the performance that you're trying to give in. And that is where you draw the line. That is where it kind of is it reaches the tipping point, and now it's in that zone where it's actually affecting you in not a positive way.
That's really great. Thank you both for sharing experiences. Shreya, would you want to share your experience the first time you dealt with imposter syndrome and what it means to you?
Yes, definitely. Thanks so much. So my first experience was when I came to IIT Gandhinagar. We have a curiosity lab here that is majorly run by Professor Jason Manjale, and one of his PhD students was in charge of sort of helping me, introducing me to the concepts in curiosity, and also running in some experiments. So that was my first time when I was in a lab, and whatever I had learned in the past, my bachelor's and master's, I was like going to apply it. I was super excited about it. It was IIT Gandhinagar, and this center, I was looking forward to joining this place for so long. And when I got the opportunity, I was extremely excited. And I read up all the reading material. I did as much as I could, and then I came up with an idea which was appreciated, but somehow I felt like it was not good enough. And I kept working on it until I mean, the PhD student was like, no, this is good enough, we can go to the next stage. And I just kept asking him, are you sure, is this good enough? I think there's still flaws in the design. I think this could be worked on a little bit more. I think I could do a little bit more of literature review. And that was where I first realized that I just felt that whatever knowledge I had was just not enough. That's what I thought was not enough to apply and do it into a experiment that would go out in the world, get tested, and I was just not ready to see the results. I thought it was going to be a complete failure. But it didn't. It worked out. It was fine, and we got some results. There were some errors, but those were just things that normally happen, and I learned so much through that process. And it was a little tricky to pinpoint and know that this was what it was. It was imposter syndrome, and definitely putting a word for it, like just saying that this is imposter syndrome, it has a term, helps you identify it much better, helps you isolate it, and helps you also in seeking counsel. So I was able to seek counsel from my whoever my colleagues were, and they were able to share the same experiences, and we had lovely conversations on these. And we were able to identify that, well, we're all here, we're all in this prestigious institute doing great work, and we're getting appreciated, but somehow we just don't feel like we deserve it. So it was that time when I felt like, yeah, okay, this is something everyone experiences.
Yeah, that's really really relatable for me. Thank you for both of you for sharing. For my experience with imposter syndrome was very similar to both of yours, and I think it's something that happens to all of us, and it's kind of like at the intersection of yours and Shreya, yours and Sasha's. When I was in high school, till about class 10, I was a really good student and all of that. But once I got into like 11, 12, like I think it happens to everyone. Just my grades were not that great, and it was just very difficult coping with the huge syllabus change and all of those things. And I think all of us in India, depending on the education system, just have gone through that phase. And also, like, getting into a competitive coaching class where everything was so much like into your face and performing with really good and rank lists and things like that. It was really like it had a huge impact on my self-esteem. not performing well or not performing up to the expectations or standards that are really high, definitely took an impact on my mental health and my self-esteem. But when I did get into one of the best colleges in India that I never expected to have got, that was my first experience with imposter syndrome. Um, there were only two seats all over India, or two places to secure this particular position for this degree that I did, and it was truly like unimaginable for me. I never thought that I would be able to get a seat. And I just thought that, okay, when I came to give my entrance exams or when I came to give my interviews, I thought that it would just be like an experience visiting a new place with my dad. I came with my dad. And it would just be a nice little trip with my dad because I never expected to get in. But when I did, it was truly life-changing for me, and it was a different experience that I never expected. And ever since then, whether it was performing well academically, even after coming to college, I just couldn't accept the fact that, it was something like imposter syndrome is there until like maybe 1 or 2 years back. And when I came across this, someone was sharing the experience of this on a video, and then so when I realized that, okay, I think I do this all the time, and there's a word for it. And like Shriya, you mentioned that it's kind of a lot easier to put a tangible like not, I wouldn't say label, but just a tangible thought to it, just to like kind of say or solidify that, okay, this is an experience that happens. So I guess according to me, imposter syndrome is something where, like all of you mentioned, is you don't tend to accept your achievements as yours, or you tend to contribute, you don't tend to give them enough importance, or you feel that you didn't really deserve to achieve them, or they're kind of false achievements. This is just my understanding. It's not a definition from a textbook or from psychology or mental health, but it's just something that I feel is how I would say imposter syndrome works. So it's kind of like downplaying your achievements, and not just achievements, but your journey or what you've come across or how you've grown. And you kind of attribute it to external factors, and you kind of say that, okay, this is not because of my work or my efforts, but just something that's basically what I don't deserve. So thank you all for sharing your thoughts. I think we can move on to something that all of us have been dealing with, and we've been trying to cope with imposter syndrome. So I would invite you, maybe Shreya, we can start with you once now. Would you want to share how you've coped with imposter syndrome? And again, I would like to just alert our audience that this is not mental health advice. This is something that we have dealt with, and this is just our way or our expressions and thoughts and opinions. So please do not consider this as mental health advice. So yeah, with that, Shreya, would you want to take over and share?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing your experience as well. It's extremely relatable when we get to a stage where we just don't feel like, well, how did we get here? Do we really deserve it? That's kind of the underlying theme, and that's where you want to identify and spot out that, okay, well, this is something that's not normal, something that you should be identifying, isolating, and seeing what it is, like just introspecting on maybe. And in terms of coping, as in, this has been a pretty tricky part because this is, I mean, like, it's not something that you just search online, like how to cope with imposter syndrome. This is generally, it just takes so much time to just figure out that you have imposter syndrome. The good thing is that there's communication, there are more people talking about it. One thing that I do remember is it's like very, very strongly etched in my memory is during monsoon brain meeting. I do not remember the speaker, but there was this wonderful speaker on the final session of the monsoon brain meeting had talked about their imposter syndrome. And he was an extremely well-known person from, I think, IIT Kanpur or Kharagpur, I'm not sure, and had gone to Cambridge, done wonderful work, is a reputed person, and everybody looks up to him. And when such a brilliant person came down and talked about his imposter syndrome, uh, that was extremely relatable, and that just made me feel like it was normal, and it happens at every stage. And that at that particular time, I felt so overwhelmed and happy, that I was recognized, that my feelings were recognized. They were not just, it was not just me. There are so many wonderful people. They do so many great things. Everyone's doing so many amazing things. And so you feel like, oh, well, why am I here? What am I doing really? And I'm sure that you guys will also have experienced the same thing when you go to prestigious institutes like that. And so the question is, what did you do? I mean, and that time, the best thing to do is sit down and introspect. Sometimes I look at my CV. Sometimes I just kind of talk to my friends and ask them, what's so amazing about me, and just let them shower their, just praises onto me. And that is one way I cope. And it's not like I don't reciprocate. It's always lovely to reciprocate. So just that my friends are aware that there's something like imposter syndrome, and sometimes you require that sort of, um, just a conversation to just boost your friend up, to say, yeah, well, you're good. And I do that with my friends as well, that you are great, you do amazing things. And I just don't like say it as a vague thing, but actually pinpoint, and try to give as much evidence as possible to tell them that, yeah, you've made impact, you're great, you've done great things, and you deserve to be here. And having such friends, it's just that thing. Or I just see my CV if my friends are not available.
No, absolutely, absolutely. All of that makes so much sense. And I think something that's, I would say, also really helped me. So, Shriya, you spoke about like speaking to your friends. And I think speaking and communicating is so important, like you mentioned. And you also spoke about how, you saw the speaker, this, somebody who was very accomplished. And it turns out he also had imposter syndrome or struggles with imposter syndrome. And that's the thing, there are more people than you think that struggle with imposter syndrome. And it's just that it doesn't seem that way because most people don't know they're struggling with imposter syndrome until they figure out, okay, they're like, oh wait, this is imposter syndrome, this isn't just me being realistic about myself and my accomplishments. So I think, like, especially with regard to college, even though, so like my classes just got admitted in and everything, getting to know each other, and we once had like this discussion about, so everybody was like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, like I have no idea why I'm here, like the rest of you are incredible, I do not deserve to be here. And like multiple people said that. And at some point we just began to talk about the idea of imposter syndrome. And everybody was like, like, I feel the exact same way, like I feel like I don't belong here, I feel like, you know um I'm not as deserving as everybody else is, just because, again, for a lot of us, we were, I guess, like valedictorians, or we were like reasonably accomplished, you can say, in high school. But then you come to college and you're like, everybody else is better than you, if not like you, right? And you know for a fact that you're surrounded by incredible people, and so you think you're not that great. But you keep reminding yourself that, like, the admissions office has been doing their job for a long time, so there has to be a reason. And I'm sure, like, they probably can evaluate you better than you can evaluate yourself. But I think more importantly, in certain cases, now with college it was still easy because I knew there were so many other people, a class full of people, like 1,600 people potentially, who might have been battling imposter syndrome for the same reasons or in the same way or form that I was. But with work, that was a little different, because the whole reason I faced imposter syndrome was because I was the youngest in the room, or the least accomplished or experienced, in terms of like degrees and work experience in the room, right? And I was making decisions, like executive decisions, at the same level at people who had been doing this for a long time and weren't just high school graduates. So in that case, it wasn't, I suppose, the most effective to talk to other people and be like, oh, you're facing the same thing I am, because it was a completely different situation. So in that case, I think some things that really helped me was, one, just kind of like reaching out to my supervisors or to, my boss or whoever it may be, and asking for feedback. Because I think a huge facet of imposter syndrome is that you overplay your weaknesses, you downplay your successes. So when you get tangible feedback from somebody that is in a position to evaluate you, somebody whose evaluation you trust, you kind of realize, you're like, okay, I have many more successes than I think I did, and my weaknesses might not be as worrisome as I thought they were. So I think just getting that from somebody you trust, who is literally in charge of supervising you, might be helpful. And in another case, if you're more in a more autonomous position where you don't particularly have like a mentor, a supervisor, a boss tracking your actions, is you just track them yourself. So, just document it. A CV might be great. So document your successes, document your failures as well, as you, if you want to, right? So that you don't look back and you're like, oh, I might have been a little biased. And I think when you just kind of like track everything down and it's in words, and like your perspective isn't playing into it all that much, you just kind of realize that you have more successes than you were initially counting, and that while you do have failures and weaknesses, they're not overwhelming and like glaring, gaping holes in like your competency. So I think those are a couple of things that helped me.
Yeah, I think that's truly amazing. Thank you both for sharing. And I think you've covered most of the things that I do as well. Some of the things that I probably have done to cope with it so far is definitely like, take peer feedback. A lot of my peers are extremely supportive, and being in the same age group, I think it's really refreshing to hear their thoughts as well, as Shia, as you mentioned, and also like from supervisors or advisors who have the ability to give you good constructive feedback and tell you how far you've come, and give you really crisp and to the point, and as well as really relatable and real thoughts of how far you've come or what you've accomplished, and why you deserve certain things that you do deserve. I think one thing that I also relate with, as you mentioned, Sasha, is being the youngest. Many times when I collaborate with people on research work, I'm with PhDs or senior professors, and I'd be the youngest person in the group with just a bachelor's degree. And many times I'd feel like my contribution isn't enough. And I think this one particular instance that I remember was that I did mention to one of the senior authors in one particular paper that I was working on, and I said, I don't think I contributed enough to this. And he like they specifically told me that never downplay your contribution, and never put yourself or sell yourself short, and whatever you've done is definitely really important towards the contribution of this paper or this particular research. And so always keep yourself high spirited. Definitely, this is a challenging thing to do. It's not always possible to do it, but it definitely helps when you have supportive people around you. Also, another thing that helped was having people with similar mindsets or similar, I would say, quest for achieving more or doing more or giving back to society more in a lot of ways. Like, both of you have also been really good support systems for me, as well as just all other people within my network that I work with, that I see just go from day to day with their daily activities, with their daily routines, and still be able to give back to society, and still be able to do different things, new things, and that kind of keeps me inspired and keeps me going. And another thing that always helps me is because I'm in patient care, I'm a healthcare professional. So I think a lot of my patients teach me a lot of things. When I see them improve, or when I see tangible results in them, in terms of the performance after I've treated them or rehabilitated them, it really gives me a sense of confidence, of self-confidence, that, okay, I have some specific skill sets to be able to help this person with their day-to-day activities or with their life, and to be able to help them function after they've gone through a severe deterioration in their health. So I think that's also something that helps me cope with it. So yeah, thank you again for sharing your different experiences and some methods to cope. I think these are just our bits and thoughts of how we deal with it, and I'm sure that some of them might be things that even other people do, but I think these are quite specific in terms of our professional careers and our work as well. All right. So since this is about global change makers, and global change makers being an organization which helps so many young people through their change making journey, transforming themselves. Some definitely people like me as well, gives them guidance and mentorship. Does a lot of dedicated work towards helping young people realize their potential for change making. I would invite both of you to share your change making journey with imposter syndrome, and also if you could elaborate a little bit about how you've dealt with rejection. Um, if you'd like to share about that as well. I'm sure that all of us have gone through rejection from different places in our change making journey as well as in our professional life. So, how does that kind of yield into imposter syndrome? So, Sasha, I would invite you to start and just tell our audience a little bit about that.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I think like speaking like just as like a preface for the work that I've been doing with like change making or public service in particular. So through high school, I worked in the sphere of mental health advocacy, connecting students and young adults, young adolescents to mental health resources that are affordable and accessible, and suited to their needs, and also just educating younger students about like sensitivity to mental illnesses, helping them understand things better. And I had the local chapter, so the Kolkata chapter of the Period Society, where we've been doing a lot of work distributing um, pads and other menstrual health products to women and menstruators from underprivileged backgrounds, and also educating them and empowering them with an understanding of how the process of menstruation works. So those are a few things I've been doing. Right now, I'm working towards COVID relief as far as possible. I'm also trying to connect the Indian diaspora or the international audience to resources that they can help out with. Given that, of course, with our country right now, it's again hard to rely on Indians living here for support, given that everyone's struggling. So that's something I've been trying to do. And I think in general, when it comes to change making, it's usually, I guess, the place where imposter syndrome, I guess, kind of sets in is it isn't necessarily about your accomplishments, because again, public service isn't really measured by accomplishments. It's measured by, I guess, the impact that you have, and that's where it sets in, because you're usually taking on global challenges or national challenges or world problems, and you feel like you're not even making like a dent in the problem at all. So you're trying and you're putting in all that time and effort, and you're like, but the problem is giant and I have no idea, like I don't think I'm doing very much, right? And I think especially even with, like, for example, like with mental health, when I held sessions with generations like X and Y, there were, of course, a lot of entrenched beliefs. You end up getting a lot of backlash sometimes, a lot of people that might get offended or might, not necessarily believe what you're trying to say. But I feel like it's important to remind yourself that those aren't necessarily failures. And in the end, they weren't failures. They worked out very well. But you just had to keep trying, right? So you can't let them discourage you. So yeah, you have to remind yourself that this doesn't mean that it's not possible and that you simply cannot make a change over here. You just want to remind yourself that if you're getting backlash, especially in terms of destigmatizing something, it means that you're working with a community where XYZ needs to be destigmatized. So you're just kind of reminding yourself that when things are hard, it doesn't reflect on you per se. It reflects more on the fact that you're doing work where it's really necessary, and that's why it's hard. So I think that's something, especially with COVID right now. You're seeing people like die around you. You're hearing news of that every day, and it I guess, like, you're trying, and I know everybody's trying. A lot of people are trying to raise funds, provide COVID relief, but it's hard to believe that you're doing anything at all when you're still seeing that, like, you're still hearing news of people dying every day. But at the same time, I think you just want to kind of remind yourself that even if, I don't know, you contribute towards like saving a single life, or getting some people registered for a vaccine, or raising funds towards like one government hospital and oxygen concentrators or cylinders there, that's still that's still a great amount of work. So I think just kind of reminding yourself of the impact, and not measuring your impact necessarily with regard to how big the problem is, because problems are big and that's why you're here to help as far as possible. But just reminding yourself that you are making a change, nonetheless, I guess. So I think those are a couple places where imposter syndrome sets in, just given the scale of a problem, the magnitude of a problem. In terms of rejection, so I can't speak personally to rejection in terms of like my I suppose like my professional life per se, because I haven't really had one. I've had one for like a year. But I would say, I in terms of, I guess, just like college admissions, right? Because I know there's so many students that get extremely disheartened when they get rejected from specific colleges, which is completely understandable. And it's understandable to get disheartened, but you don't, I guess, the point at which it becomes harmful is when you say this rejection means that I'm not good enough for anything or any other future opportunities. And I guess, the reason that sets in is because you're seeing that you're getting rejected from XYZ schools and you're seeing people get accepted everywhere else. And I think in general with success, you're aware of your weaknesses or your failures. You're not aware of other people's failures or other people's weaknesses. So speaking to myself, like I might have gotten accepted into, like, let's say Harvard and Stanford, and a lot of people know about that. But I also got, like, for those two schools, I also got rejected from Yale and Princeton, which are equally good schools. But for example, I wouldn't have like Yale reject 2024 like up on my Instagram bio, right? So there are so many failures, on the part of other people, not failures per se, but just rejections that you're not aware of. So you just want to keep reminding yourself that you're aware of your rejections and failures. You aren't aware of that side for other people. So it doesn't make sense to compare um, yourself within the context of just a picture that you only have, like, I guess, like, um, that you only know half of. So yeah, I guess those are a couple of things that I can speak to.
Shreya, do you want to go next and share? Thank you so much, Sasha, for those incredible experiences. I think a lot of young people can relate to that, especially those who are applying to colleges. And it's been truly a hindrance with COVID. I think it's actually heightened our, and it's not just me saying, research has also proven it's heightened a lot of, in general, anxiety. Imposter syndrome is quite evident among young people these days. So thank you for sharing. And Shreya, would you want to share your experiences?
Yeah, definitely. So Sasha shared a wonderful experience of hers, and she's been a brilliant change maker, and she's been doing amazing work and impacting so many lives in a positive way. So that's brilliant. I actually look up to both of these two women, who is Stuti Chakrabarti and Sasha Agarwal, for the change making journey that they've had. And I've been influenced by them to sort of be in this journey, to start this journey, which was very late. There are two things that I'm really passionate about. It's the brain sciences, that's what I've been pursuing, learning throughout, and also the environment. And I've sort of started my change making journey in the issue of climate change, and I've been trying to address that as much as possible. So I've been trying to do it with the Tomorrow Project. We have some campaigns we've released. I started like a student initiative within IIT Gandhinagar for just awareness on climate change, and we've made a game on like waste segregation. So now if I just talk about the game that we made on waste segregation, so I actually picked out this idea from one of the papers from University of British Columbia, and I just suggested it forward, and then there was a team that came up who were very enthusiastic members, and they made this together. And then now finally, after a lot of months, it's outside and people are playing it, and we are yet to see the impact of it, but we hope it would be a positive impact. We hope people will learn how to segregate correctly. And in this situation where you're working in a team of people, and it's not even a unique idea, it's just something that sort of came in, but I thought this sort of fit very well in this particular circumstance. How do I give myself credit for this particular uh, you know program? How do I say that I have contributed to the impact? um, it's a really hard thing to say, and that is definitely, and imposter syndrome doesn't help in here, because it just comes in and kind of gives you more reasons to just say that, well, you didn't really do much, you just saw a paper, it was coincidental, and you were just at the right place at the right time. And that happens so often, where you just feel like you were just at the right place at the right time, and some people got benefited from it, and that's great. But it's really hard to give yourself that pat on the back, that yes, you did something that was worth it.
Kind of share my journey of change making. I think it also started a little bit later as compared to like Sasha's, I think it was towards the second or third year of my undergraduate degree, I was totally like, saturated with going to just college, coming back, doing my academics, and just contributing to like certain to a certain level. I wanted to break free from the boundaries and kind of explore what I can do more. So I used to read a lot and write a lot when I was in high school, and after coming to college, I kind of shed off of that habit just due to lack of time. And so really, when I got some more free time on my hand, I kind of wanted to explore how I can give back to society. I couldn't possibly go out and do a lot of field work with the academic attendance restrictions that I had, or with just the clinical commitments that I had as a student. So I wanted to do something that I could give back to society using my specific passion or skills that I did have, and one of them was writing. And so I started writing a lot and advocating a lot through my writing work. And I remember one of the first experiences that I had was as a UN online volunteer. I came across the platform, and that's kind of where my journey started. And I would write things for, like, people with amputations or people with disabilities, or just write about topics that are relevant, like whether the healthcare industry is green. So that was basically like my effort to amalgamate my ability to write as well as my knowledge or my skills in healthcare, or as a healthcare professional in the making. So that's when my journey started, and then from there I went on to contribute to a lot of organizations, a lot of global organizations, and that kind of again set in my imposter syndrome. And so I did a consultation on primary healthcare with a lot of young students, and because of that, because of the work that I did, I was selected as one of the 3 people from India to represent India at the Global Conference on Primary Healthcare in 2018, which was held in Astana. It was organized by WHO, UNICEF, and the Ministry of Health of Kazakhstan, and I was representing the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth as one of the 3 delegates from India. The primary global conference on primary healthcare held in 2018, and it was one of the most historic moments of my life, as well as in history in general, because it was the new adoption of framework or guidelines that were laid out um, to sort of guide primary healthcare. So I guess I can, in the future say that I was a part of making history. And so that's when kind of like my journey really started. And it was a truly different experience. And while my journey for change making also kind of started evolving with that particular experience, when I went, and I was surrounded by so many amazing people. I mean, there was Dr. Tedros there, and there was the health minister of India there, and there were a room full of just established dignitaries and delegates that were part of that conference, not just from India, but also from different parts of the world. And I was there in the same room as them, listening to them talk in person, and just being like a young 21-year-old. That was truly life changing for me, and that also kind of made me feel like, wow, what did I do to deserve this and be up here? And even till today I think about that was just luck by chance kind of thing. But then I thought about it, and I really felt that it's from then I've come so far. And even though I might think that I might not have done a lot back then, but now I look back and I see that definitely I have come a long way. And I think another thing that I kind of deal with to deal with imposter syndrome, how I cope with it, is just to sort of, I used to do this a lot before, but I've tried to tone it down, is to sort of validate myself based on just my achievements, and give myself validation based on whatever I have achieved, whether it's like scientifically doing research work, or even professionally with all the advocacy that I do. I really focus, I've started giving more importance to the impact that it might have on a larger scale, on people's lives or on people's thought processes, even if it's not me being able to go out tangibly and do things. But if I am able to write something that might sustainably get a conversation going, or that might, be a way to, lead policy change. So even those small things, I have started looking at it as really big things. and really big achievements. And of course, I'm thankful for all the opportunities that I have been given thus far. I think I've come a really long way, and now I've come to a point where earlier I used to kind of take in a lot of things on my head and think that I want to change everything and want to contribute to everything. And that also led to kind of, my imposter syndrome growing, because if I was not able to set up and meet the expectations that I had set up for myself, or get a rejection, I was too startled to, you know deal with it. I would like really kind of slide into a really low phase after getting rejected from certain places for a long, for a long number of days. And that kind of started really taking a toll on my mental health. But something that, we're going to talk about now is support systems. That's where, like, my parents kind of came in and told me that, see, this is not, you're so young and you've already done so many things, and, amazing, great going. And, just don't get disheartened by small things. And those words of encouragement from my parents kind of really made me realize that I shouldn't be chasing everything, I shouldn't be going for everything, and I shouldn't be expecting to get a yes from everywhere. And that's when I kind of really realized that, that's one of the ways to deal with rejection, is to not basically go after anything and everything, to really select where you want to channelize and your efforts. So in that way, it will be a lot easier for you to also contribute in a significant way, rather than you trying to do everything all at once. And it will also make your work a lot more impactful. And that's when I kind of realized that, it became a lot more easier for me to deal with rejection as well. Just taking off of that, I want to slowly go into a tangent of support systems, and maybe just quickly, both of you can. We've already spoken about this in other parts of the conversation, but if you both could just tell me a little bit about your support systems thus far, and people or things or activities that you've done to cope with imposter syndrome. So, Shreya, would you want to quickly start off?
Yeah, definitely. So, with regards to support system, I think I've been very lucky, and I think you mentioned this right before, that luck has a huge role to play here, is what we believe, but maybe it's also true. I'm not quite sure about that. Rejection has a lot to do with luck. I mean, sometimes you do get it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes it's not about you. So it's a lot about other circumstances that you can't really handle, and that can be a little hard to take, because if it's something that you've really put in your heart and soul into, um, it's just hard to face that sort of rejection, that sort of failure, because it feels so personal, because it is so personal. And that's where support systems come in. And that support systems could be anyone. They could be your colleagues, they could be even people on Quora who have responded to your answers, who've been helpful in identifying correct resources. Support system could even be probably a person who runs a podcast or a blogger, whose articles you read and you feel like, oh well, they're going through the same things. And support systems could be the people you're really close to and you're able to talk to about your personal failures. Basically, if you're able to relate with someone about your personal failures and they're able to encourage you and get out of that bubble, which kind of continuously makes you want to grieve, that could be a good support system. And I'm fortunate to have colleagues who talk about this, who openly talk about imposter syndrome. I remember having in the mess this conversation about maybe men are they are not that susceptible to imposter syndrome as females, and we had a lovely debate from the men's side, the female side, and there was no proper conclusion because we're definitely not a representative population, but it was just lovely to at least acknowledge that we're all there in that same boat. What about you, Sasha? What are your support systems that you look forward to?
I think that was so well put, Shriya, and I think that makes so much sense. And I especially like that you spoke about luck and how luck plays in or doesn't play in, because again, it's just like a typical like attribution bias. We when we succeed, we're like, oh, we got lucky, and when we fail, we're like, oh, this is on me. I am like incompetent. So I think just kind of just being cognizant of that luck but also competency play into both your successes and failures, and not kind of like overplaying the role of luck when you succeed and overplaying your lack of competency when you fail. So I think that's so important, and just being cognizant of that thinking process really helps, because I think that's been able to kind of allow me also to introspect and be like, okay, what were the external factors at work here, at play here, and what could I have done better, or what did I contribute to this? So just being, I think, aware of that also really helps sometimes. And I think in terms of my support systems, definitely my circle of friends. um, I've sought so much support from them. They've been there for me like through thick and thin, honestly. My friends at large, but also specifically the small circle of friends that I've had with me through high school. Um, Honestly, like I know for a fact that if ever I guess, like facing imposter syndrome, or I'm distressed about anything, like they'll always be there. They were the first people to hear about like my college acceptances. One of them was up at like 4:30 a.m., like the obscura that they come out, and she got to know, and she like woke the rest of the friend circle up, and they were just there, like they're like almost like my pseudo family. So definitely that circle of friends. And especially I think like my best friend, I would say, has definitely been like my greatest support system. So to give you more context, like my best friend, she's my neighbor, and she also was in the same class with me when we were in high school, because we studied the same subjects. So it's safe to say I've spent a lot of time with her. But she's been, honestly, for me, she's been there for me, like literally as a sister, as a best friend. Her family's been there for me. It's funny, like it's almost like I'm like, they're like my second family. So I think she's been there for me in the sense that she's all I think, when you're close to somebody, you get to the stage where you're completely honest. So neither of us would like agree with the other person just for the sake of like keeping them happy. At the same time, we reach that stage where we understand how the other person thinks. And so, for example, like with her, like she knows when I might not be giving myself enough credit, and that's where she steps in, right? At the same time, I know that she's honest with me, so I know that I can trust her advice or her criticism, because I know that she isn't just saying things for the sake of saying it. So I think it's really important to be able to kind of establish a relationship that close with even one person or two people, just people who you trust in their evaluation of you. So that if they tell you something or give you any kind of feedback, you can trust that they're speaking from knowledge, or they're speaking from an actual understanding of you. And you can essentially just trust that feedback the way you would trust the feedback of like a mentor or a supervisor. But the reason it's important to have a friend as well is because a mentor or a supervisor only knows your performance at the workplace, not necessarily your personal circumstances, external circumstances that can come into play, how you're doing just as a person. Like, we give each other feedback on how we are as people. So I think it's so important to have that person that can give you feedback, because again, feedback is always helpful. It helps you really put into perspective what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. So I think, yeah, definitely that circle of friends, and specifically like my best friend, like she's been there every step of the way, and I know that I genuinely trust her um, with what she tells me I might be doing well or might not be doing well, or taking enough credit for or not taking enough credit for. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really great. Both of you have really different experiences with your support systems. I think for me also, to a certain extent, definitely my best friend here in my college where I am working right now. She's also like really been there for me through thick and thin, and really steps in to give me like kind of a check or a reminder when I'm like stressing over my future, or just grad school applications that I'm kind of preparing for at the moment. So she always tells me that don't worry so much, you've done enough all this while. And so she always kind of steps in, also gives me like a reality check. And as Sasha, you mentioned that it's kind of like really honest and an independent exchange between both of us, so I can rely on her to kind of tell me how it is rather than sugarcoating anything for me. And so I think that's really great to have support system like that. And also definitely my parents and my family. I think not so much my extended family, but definitely my parents. definitely my parents, who've been there for me, since the beginning, and just get like excited for small things. Like my mom and my dad both, like especially my mom, just is kind of always there, tries to be there for all my talks or presentations that I do, and like just be there and cheer me on. And she's always there to like watch things that I've done, or she asks me what is this, what is that, and she takes like a genuine interest. And it's kind of like sometimes very difficult to explain every single thing to her, but she always keeps a check. And then just asking my parents, asking me whether I'm eating properly, or whether I'm taking enough rest, sleeping enough. All of those things kind of really helps in terms of support systems. Apart from that, I think everybody at my institution, I mean, I don't think like there's specifically people who've done like a lot of things. I think all of them have done something in a small way that has contributed to whatever I've been able to achieve till now. And definitely, I think when you talk about support systems, I also think about my professional network of people. So it's all the people that I work with. They definitely support mentors, advisors, people that I'm involved with in any kind of activity. So everybody works together to push the project or push the idea forward. And I think that's also a great support system in terms of how we professionally connect with each other. And also definitely at Stimulus, I think you both also have also been a really good support system. And I think one thing that I would like to mention here with regards to Stimulus as an organization, that we're trying maybe in our small bits, and I guess both of you might agree that we're trying to build a support system for our volunteers as well. The people that work with us, most of them are extremely young, and they're just starting out in their professional journey or their academic journeys. And so we're just trying a little bit to be there for them and support them as much as possible. Just telling them that we're here to like listen to them anytime that they have any difficulties, and also at the same time trying to help them with specific things that they might need help with. So I think that as an organization is kind of something that we're trying to do in our small way. Definitely not, doing a major thing where we do like major activities or things like that, but just small things that we can do as an organization. I think we've all been trying to do that. So having said that, I think we've come to the end, and I think the last slide says it all. It's okay. And I think quickly, if both of you can share your concluding thoughts and statements, then we can, just come to a conclusion with our session today.
So thanks so much, Stuti. So with what you were just talking about, especially with support systems, I think one of the other things that maybe is just like a small reminder that maybe you don't have the best support system available to you, and maybe you don't have those friends or family members who are supportive, and you may be trying to get out of that and trying to like go beyond and try to see what you're able to do, what you're worth, etc. And in those cases, it's always wonderful to look at the people who are professionally connected to you. Just like Sasha mentioned, it's so important to have a reality check. And sometimes the people who are working with you are able to give you that, are able to give you that credit. So sometimes you may not be able to get it from your close knit family members or friends, but sometimes you can get that support from the professional networks that you've built and get credit for the work that you've been doing, and that will definitely encourage you to go forward. But the essence of it all is that without support systems, it can get pretty lonely, it can get pretty scary, and you may be wondering why you're there, and it can actually dull your shine. I mean, so it's really important to find those support systems because they do help. And that's what we hope that we are also doing with Stimulus, with the volunteers that have come in. They're very young students, and they're just trying to explore this arena of neuroscience. They're trying to see where their interests lie, what their skills are, and we hope that we're also able to provide that sort of support system for them as well. So at the end of the day, it's okay. I mean, you've done a lot. you do you. You try to be who you are, and succeed in whatever ways you find is relevant to you. And it's important to stay happy throughout and be ambitious as well if you're trying to make that change. But it's important to remind yourself about the amazing things that you've achieved. Also remind yourself of the failures and the rejections, and also tell yourself, introspect and tell yourself, give yourself that reality check with your friends, with your family members, with your professional friends, anyone whom you could just have a lovely conversation with.
Absolutely, absolutely. That makes so much sense. And again, thank you, Shriya, for putting it so well. And I do think, especially when you speak of how, in certain cases, like some support systems might not work out too well, others might work out better. That's so true. Just because like we've had specific support systems, that doesn't mean that those are the only support systems that work. Because honestly, you can find support in so many different kinds of relationships. Like I know for a fact that I found a lot of support, especially in the 11th and 12th grade when things were like a little harder, and I needed some additional support. I was able to find a lot of support in like my high school teachers, and some of them were just so supportive, and they were always there for me every step of the way, and they just gave me, I think, the added support that I needed. So you can always look for support in your professional networks. I've had seniors that have really helped me. I think in general, there've been so many instances where I found support in unlikely places, even if that place is perhaps, let's say, I don't know, even if you're an animal person, like you could get a pet. A pet is a great support system, right? So just kind of having that relationship. And I think there are two relationships that's necessary. I think one is where you get that honest feedback, you have like that reality check system, and the other is just where you seek comfort and you seek like a safe space, right? Sometimes they can be in different sources, sometimes they can be the same source. So it's so important to have that. And yeah, I think in general, even with stimulus, we've tried to be there, I think, is guidance for our volunteers. At the same time, I feel like with our volunteers, some of them are very young, they're just starting out, but at the same time, I think that also really helps stimulus and really helps us shape our vision better, because a lot of them are the target audience that we're also trying to reach out to. So obviously their perspectives in those cases are very, very helpful, because then we know what we can do effectively and not do effectively. So yeah, I think, and that's what I think, I think it's so important, especially with relationships like mentors, things like that. It's always, I think even with like professional relationships, always be, I guess, like thankful and cognizant of what you're getting out of the relationship. Like, okay, they're giving me a reality check, or they're giving me guidance, or they're giving me something like that. But also, especially for two-way relationships, like friendships or professional networks, things like that, also be cognizant of what you're putting into, what you're contributing to the relationship. Because again, you don't want imposter syndrome to set in there either, like, oh, I'm not deserving of all this support from this incredible person, but you're always giving out support as well in ways that you might not be able to recognize initially. So yeah, I think just remembering that. And I think just like one last thing before I stop talking is just that there's it's like there's so many times, I think, where we might be presented with opportunities and we're like, I don't think I'm going to be good enough for this. So we're given an opportunity, we're given like a resource to leverage, or some kind of yeah, some kind of opportunity, and you're like, I just don't think I'm good enough, and I don't think I'm going to be able to do this very well. But just remember, if you're unsure, that's usually, it's just go with it, take the opportunity, and you'll figure it out down the line. Humans are adaptable, and more importantly, you've been offered the opportunity for a reason, which will be revealed to you in due time. So if you're unsure, just go with it, go forward, because you don't want to regret it down the line. But yeah, that's like my 2 cents on the topic.
Yeah, I think very, again, amazing reflections by both of you. And just to add on to what you said, Sasha, like um, professionally also, it's really important that we are thankful and we are grateful for all the advice that we get. I personally have got so much of advice in terms of my professional career, academic career, and also my change making journey from alumni. And sometimes it's really helpful because they have a vision, or they have an understanding that kind of transcends across the boundaries of what you are able to see, because specifically because of the experiences that they've had, and in terms of how much more of the world that they have seen. And so I think that's really important to just reach out to an advisor or a mentor and take advice from them also. And that really helps with kind of you seeing clearly what your aim, or just kind of clarifying objectives or for your goals and perspectives on life. So I think that's really important. And once you have that clarity, I think it helps a lot with your imposter syndrome as well, because I think lack of focus and lack of clarity also adds to a feeling of or a sense of, okay, I don't know where I'm going, I don't know what direction I'm headed in, I'm not good enough for certain things. And I think that lack of focus also kind of contributes a lot to your imposter syndrome. So I think at the end of the day, again, just to summarize what both of you have really beautifully put forward is, it's okay, and just do not have any doubt is what I would say. If it's out there, if it's for you, if you feel like it's the right thing, if you want to do it, just go ahead. Don't think about what the world is going to think. Don't think about what other people are going to think. We have so many examples. I'm so proud to belong to a generation where people are diversifying, people are taking up issues and of oppression or systemic changes that haven't been addressed for so many years together, maybe hundreds and hundreds of years together, and we as a generation are bringing forward that change. So I think I'm so proud to be a part of this generation, and so proud to be just young person living through these times where we can see significant change happening that had been stagnated for years together. So I think if there's a time to go out there, explore yourself, give back to the world, give back to society, and at the same time also discover yourself, I think this is the right time for it. And time hasn't been any better, and it's not going to be the right time ever. I mean, in general, you cannot wait for the right time. If you are thinking of doing something in change making, or just thinking of going and doing something out there, whatever it is, no matter whether it's related to your profession, your academics, your family, just anything in general, whether it's societally accepted as a norm or not, it's definitely, as long as it's within legal confinements, it's definitely, for you to just go grab it and go ahead and do it. And so I think that's enough motivation from all of us. I think what we're basically the sense of what we're trying to say is, it's okay, we all deal with it. And, we've all had our ways and our own methods of going about with it. But having said that, it does not mean that you keep saying you're saying to yourself that it's okay and you neglect your mental health. Definitely, please pay attention and heed to your mental health. If at any point of time it gets too much or too overwhelming for you to take, and you feel that there is a breakdown of your roles or your functioning as an individual because of a lack of support, and it's taking a toll over your mental health, that's definitely a red flag that you must identify, acknowledge, and reach out to somebody that's professional and is able to help you out. And we hope that you have access to these resources and facilities. And in case you're not, you can always reach out to other people, organizations, or initiatives that can guide you and link you to the correct professionals, or link you to the correct path on how to seek out help. So definitely do not underplay your challenges with your mental health by saying it's okay all the time. Definitely, like I mentioned, identify the red flags and act upon them. So I think with that, we can conclude our session. And Sasha, Shriya, both of you have been really amazing. And thank you so much for being so transparent and opening up about your experiences. We hope that this has been able to just, if not really give a lot of guidance, advice, just help our audience to kind of relate with our experiences. And hopefully going forward, they can pursue whatever they want to pursue despite dealing with imposter syndrome. And hopefully we've been able to be of some help through our experiences to everyone out there. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Global Changemakers, and a special shout out to Yasmin, who's always been there as part of Global Changemakers for me personally. And so thank you so much for giving us this opportunity and giving Stimulus and its co-founders this opportunity to come on board and share with you today. Thank you and take care.